Coming up on AEA Amplified, Kevin Barton, founder of Bartronix Aerospace Services.
From the Aircraft Electronics Association, this is AEA Amplified, a podcast for aviation's technology experts, with your host, Jeff Hill.
Hello, aviation friends. Welcome back to another episode of AEA Amplified, sponsored by Avionics News, the AEA's monthly magazine available in print, online, and mobile apps for iOS and Android devices. I'm your host, Jeff Hill, for this February 15th, 2024 edition of AEA Amplified, and today we are joined by Kevin Barton. He is the founder of Bartronix Aerospace Services, and that's an AEA member company located in Rimbey, Alberta, Canada. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us. And before we jump into the type of services you provide for our listeners, just let us know. I know you've spent more than 20 years working in the general aviation industry, and that includes 7 years as an aircraft maintenance engineer. So just take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us about your professional career, where you've worked, and how all of that experience helped inspire you to start your own company.
Thanks, Jeff. It's an honor to be here today and having the opportunity to talk with you. Really appreciate that. As you mentioned, I've been working in aviation since graduating in 1999. I did my AME license for the first 7 years of my career, and then I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work in the engineering department doing aircraft certifications. After doing that for a while, I was able to finally achieve delegation under a DAO, which is a Canadian version of the ODA. And then started my company about 2 years ago after receiving my DAR delegation, which is, again, a Canadian version of a DER. During that whole period, I also took a brief hiatus to do some instructing at a local college for avionics. But ultimately, I missed getting to work with aircraft and working on and with people around aircraft. So I left the education and moved back into aircraft certification.
And then you founded Bartronix just a couple of years ago, I think, in 2022, and you offer aircraft certification, testing, and airworthiness reviews. Can you break each of those services down in just a little bit more detail and tell us how your company operates?
Yeah, I think you could probably boil my company down to kind of one simple function, which is providing our customers with approved data. There's a bunch of different ways that we can do that. The most typical is an STC, but we also have other routes that we can take to get approved data. The first step in any successful program really is to identify what the customer needs and to achieve their goals. We try to spend some time at the beginning of each project to discuss the various methods that we have available to us, and then work with the customer to achieve a successful path to their goal, and that will end up meeting their needs. Sometimes it's just a matter of providing some advice to the customer to allow them to use existing approved data. Sometimes we may be doing just a simple review and approve of the data. And sometimes it could be much more in depth, where we're creating the data, working through the prototype installation, witnessing certification testing, and approving the data so the customer can release their aircraft back to service. Ultimately, we just want to provide really good quality support to our customers, whatever their needs are.
So when you look ahead, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, what is your vision for Bartronix? How do you see your company evolving and growing in the future?
Yeah, that's always a really tough question to state, but I think really what our goal is to be able to build Bartronix into a broader DAO services company where we can help mentor and bring new talent into the aircraft industry, and then longer term, really to become maybe add some manufacturing so we can sell STCs and kits to the global aviation industry.
And once again, we are visiting with Kevin Barton of Bartronix Aerospace Services here on AEA Amplified, sponsored by Avionics News Magazine. And Kevin, obviously you are in Canada. There are several AEA member companies that are located in Canada, and of course there are some differences in the way Canada operates and manages its aviation industry when you compare it to the United States and some other regions around the world. So, if you could you just walk us through a little bit of kind of what the state of the industry is like in Canada right now for GA, and what are some of the most important issues facing the industry right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Jeff. I think generally speaking, the Canadian aviation industry is facing a lot of the same issues that the US is seeing. I think right now the industry is really robust. We may be starting to see some economic softening across the North America economies. So we may be starting to head into a little leaner time, but right now I think everybody's doing fairly well. I think the biggest problem that a lot of companies are facing, like the US, is just finding and retaining skilled employees. I think that's a challenge for a lot of the companies right now. As we know, the work world is changing, and I think aviation industry as a whole has to do a better job of competing for that top talent against other industries. Part of this may be adapting to the new work culture that we have, and then also really getting people excited again about aviation in general. On the regulatory side, I think like transport or like the FAA, transport is facing a lot of their senior workforce kind of retiring and moving out. And they're having to bring in new people and train them. So I think the industry as a whole has the opportunity to kind of help shoulder some of that load in training the new regulatory staff in their interactions on day to day with them, and really trying to support the regulatory agencies as a whole in this process. Then on a more technical level, obviously in Canada, I think ADS-B is going to be a big challenge facing our aviation community, not just in Canada, but also in the US, because it's going to affect a lot of owner operators flying into Canada, having to comply with different regulations than what they're currently complying with.
Yeah, and you mentioned ADS-B. I know, Canada's approach to implementation of ADS-B has been unique. Talk a little bit more about that. What's the latest, and where are we at exactly with ADS-B in Canada right now?
Well, I think this is a topic we could probably dedicate an entire show to. So I'll try to keep it at a higher level. This landscape is constantly changing, and even recently, we've had some dates that have been amended and stuff like that. So really what it stems down to, for those that don't understand what Canada is facing, is the landmass in Canada is quite large, and our population is quite small. I think we're like about 1/10 the size of the US population, but we have approximately the same landmass. So when the US went to put the towers in for ADS-B, it was probably a lot easier solution because they're of the density of the population and the airport density as well. So they get better coverage right off the bat just by installing these towers at airports. We in Canada don't have that level of airports and density. So a land-based solution was probably not going to serve Canada well. So NAV Canada took the approach of going to a space-based ADS-B coverage. But what this requires then is it really requires a diversity antenna, which is a top and a bottom mounted antenna, so that the space-based portion can see the aircraft and the ground-based portion can see the aircraft. So that obviously brings in some technical issues when we have a more ground-based approach in the US and not everybody putting diversity equipment on when they're flying into Canada. Recently, NAV Canada has implemented ADS-B in Class A airspace, which is the high airspace. That has been implemented since, I think, 2023 sometime. But that affected mostly airliners that already have the diversity equipment installed, and it wasn't as big of an issue foremost airline. The new mandate is for May 16th of 2024, which is coming up really quick here, for Class B airspace, which is kind of that above 12.5 portion. And then recently, they've pushed back the Class C, D, and E airspace to no earlier than 2028. So that gives us a little bit of time to try to fix some of these issues that we're all going to see in the industry. Kevin Bruce is meeting with Transport Canada and Nav Canada this week. So we might get some additional clarity coming out of those discussions, which we'll be able to talk about probably really well at the conference in Dallas coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. There, and Kevin, you're a member of the AEA Board of Directors and have served for the past 3 years. And congratulations, recently elected to serve another term by the membership. You also are the chair of the AEA's Government and Industry Affairs Committee, so certainly an expert on these topics. As such, of course, you are actively involved with putting together the annual AEA Canada regional meeting, and you also guide the Canadian roundtable discussion each year at the AEA convention that you mentioned there. And that's going to be that discussion, that roundtable for the Canadian members, is going to take place on Wednesday, March the 20th in Dallas. So at that particular roundtable, what issues do you foresee being on the table there and discussed at the Canadian roundtable at AEA Dallas?
Well, first, I just want to say I'm really grateful to be elected again for my second term. It's been an absolute privilege and honor to be able to serve on the AEA board, and I'd like to thank all the members that took time to vote in the election. I have the privilege to serve with some truly amazing people who have all contributed to the wonderful success we see in the AEA right now, including the staff. I mean, the AEA staff is absolutely amazing. Everybody's truly committed to our goals and furthering our causes, and the members as well. And just joining and being part of that organization, it's amazing to see. Getting back to your actual question, I'm always really pleasantly surprised by the great discussions that we get into at the roundtables. I think the key points this year, like I mentioned, are going to be kind of workforce development, regulatory concerns with Transport Canada, and the Canadian ADSB mandate. I think those are going to be probably the three largest topics for the roundtable.
And Kevin, of course, you're one of the industry leaders in the delegate community, as we've mentioned, and that's found a home the delegate community has with the AEA to just represent the interests of delegates around the world. Together with Kevin Bruce, you mentioned him earlier. He is the AEA's Director of Engineering and Certification. The two of you will be leading the second annual Delegates Conference. And that also takes place at the AEA convention. It will be on the fourth and final day of the show, which is Friday, March the 22nd. The Delegates Conference is, it's just kind of an opportunity for the delegate community, the DERs, DARs, ODAs, et cetera, to discuss the relevant topics with the regulatory authorities that'll be there from the FAA, from Transport Canada. What can you tell us about the Delegates Conference coming up in March? Who should attend and why?
Yeah, this is really super exciting, and I'm really grateful to the AEA in its expansion to support delegates in providing engineering and certification services around the world. I really believe that the AEA is uniquely positioned to provide support to the delegate community. The work that Rick and Kevin have done on the regulatory side for the regular members, it dovetails so nicely with the work that delegates do on a daily basis that there's a really strong synergy there. I think also the training that the AEA provides is a great resource for any delegate member. We get kind of forgotten in that term, and I think the AEA is doing an excellent job of recognizing the foundation that they built that they can share with the delegate community. And Kevin Bruce recently, I know he's been part of the AEA for quite some time, but his recent kind of full-time employment I think has been an excellent addition to the AEA family. He's got an extensive background in aircraft engineering and certification, and he'll be a really strong asset for the AEA membership. I would like to also point out that Scott Starrick, uh, David Rankin, who I believe you had on the podcast a couple of episodes ago, and Kevin St. Aubin have been part of the delegate subcommittee and have really contributed to the success of the delegate conference. Obviously, the AEA staff are essential to putting this on, so I really want to thank them as well, and the rest of the members of the AEA delegate subcommittee. I think we have a lot of great topics to discuss this year. We'll get some great one-on-one time with the regulators from both Transport Canada and the FAA. And in my opinion, if you're a delegate, you should attend. We really tried to ensure that this is not a discipline-specific event and that it will appeal to basically all delegates, regardless of their specialty. The delegate community is really small relative to the maintenance and manufacturing communities. And we wanted to be able to really maximize our impact on that community. There's a lot of issues that avionics and electrical delegates will face that will be very similar to what structures delegates will face. So by choosing our topics that would apply to the delegate as a whole, we are really trying to support all the people who support the maintenance and manufacturing AEA members. I'd just like to point out it's really hard to put in a GPS system in your aircraft without having both electrical and structural delegates sign off on the approved data. So that's our goal, and we're trying to really cater to everybody that would be a delegate. So,
and we can't wait to see all those delegates and welcome them to Dallas here towards the end of the March. And Kevin, before we let you go, it is time, of course, for our lightning round and our final four questions, sponsored by Avionics News. We're just simply looking for the first thing that comes to mind for you and why you feel that way for each of our final four questions. So let's get started. Number one, for aviation enthusiasts who have never been to Canada, what is the one place you would recommend they visit in your country and why?
yeah, that's a great question. So my father really loved aviation, and he was really the catalyst for me getting into aviation. And I remember as a kid him taking us down to the Reynolds Museum in Wetaskiwin on the weekends, and we would get to see their displays on the history of aviation there. The museum isn't just dedicated to aviation, it has all sorts of machines. So it really, really appeals to that inner engineer in all of us.
Very good. All right. Number two, of course, you're new, fairly new business owner with your own company there. What's the one thing in your business adventure that you've experienced that you did not expect?
So I did expect to have to wear a lot of hats. I didn't expect to know that wearing those hats would take as much time as they do on all of the tasks. I think that's the one thing that's a surprise to a lot of people, is that there's a lot of things you have to do and a lot of things pulling your attention. So it's not just about going in and providing the best service you can to your customers. It's also about sales and marketing and accounting and finance and all of those lovely things that we have to be aware of. I'm really fortunate that my wife decided to take the journey with me, and she's a partner in the business. So she can shoulder some of the responsibility, especially the accounting portion, which I really don't enjoy. So that really helps out a lot and takes a little bit off my plate.
You bet. You bet. All right. Number three, if someone is interested in being a delegate in the aviation industry, what advice would you give them and how do they get started?
So the one piece of advice that I would probably give to anybody starting out in this is be patient and maximize your learning opportunities. Getting a job in aviation is relatively the easy part coming out of school, but having the patience to go through on this journey to delegation can be the trickier part. It's a very long process. It can take a decade or more in some cases. My journey took over a decade, but obviously I had a couple of different stops along the way, so it was a little bit unique in that respect. But I think really just learn as much as you can, soak up the information, and have patience and just stick with it.
All right, very good advice. All right, all right. Number 4, the fourth and final one of our final 4. Is there anything else you would like to share with the avionics community that we haven't covered so far?
Well, Jeff, I think many people know that you should never ask me an open-ended question. I will take as much of the time as I can to answer that.
There you go.
But
Very good.
but I think one of the things that I'd like to really just emphasize is just remind all the AEA members to get involved in the committees, get involved in the board of directors. Just it's your association and you'll get what you put in. AEA has some excellent resources. They have excellent training opportunities. They have new, I'm sorry, I'm going to mess up the name of this, but the hiring portion that they've gone through. There's been a ton of effort put into really maximizing the return for members. So I think that would be the number one thing that I'd like to leave with everybody is if you're not a member, join. And if you are a member, get involved. So again, thanks very much, Jeff, for the opportunity to be on the podcast today. I had an awesome time.
And thank you, Kevin Barton, for joining us here on AEA Amplified. And let me let everybody know that you can certainly learn more about Kevin's company, Bartronix Aerospace Services, on the website at bartronix.com. That is BARTRONIX.com. And just a couple of reminders before we sign off. We do have some upcoming avionics courses that are taking place and scheduled over the next several months here at AEA Headquarters in Lee Summit, Missouri. Each of those classes, though, seating is limited, so you will want to check out the course schedule and enroll today to reserve your seat at any one of those courses. You can do all of that at aea.net/training. And we've talked about the AEA convention where that Canadian roundtable is going to be taking place, as well as the delegates conference. If you've not registered yet for the show, please do so by March the 1st. And if you do that by the 1st here, which is just a couple of weeks away, that's going to save you $100 off the on-site rate. So go ahead and register by March the 1st. We look forward to seeing the entire avionics community come together for 4 days of training, new products, networking, all of it in Dallas, Texas, March 19th through the 22nd. And you can get your full attendee registration as well as daily registration if you can't be there for the full show. All of that is at aea.net/convention. And that is going to wrap it up for today's show. We hope you can join us again soon for another episode of AEA Amplified, sponsored by Avionics News, the monthly magazine available in print, online, and mobile apps for iOS and Android devices. You can check all of that out at avionicsnews.net. Thanks again to Kevin Barton of Bartronix Aerospace Services for being our guest today, and until next time, here on AEA Amplified, for our producer, engineer Aaron Ward, this is your host, Jeff Hill, wishing you blue skies ahead. So long, everybody.